Well, it is good to be back up here again to talk with you a little while about family matters. I know it's a little difficult time after lunch, and so I'll try to be as energetic as I can. But anyway, we appreciate everyone, all of you, for being here, and it's really a good time that we can be together. Some of the things that you have asked me that I didn't mention this morning, if we had any grandkids, yes, we do have 9. And so it's a fun time, but we're kind of in that sandwich generation now. My mother is still living. She's 93. Judy's parents came to live with us 2 years ago from North Carolina, and they have been there. And then 2 months ago, her dad passed away. He had leukemia and colon cancer, and her mother is still there with us, and she actually has, for the first time since we've had them, she's gone to Judy's oldest sister over in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She's going to be there for about 2.5 weeks. In fact, she's going over traveling with them today, and she has dementia, which is kind of an interesting thing to deal with, and a lot of you are there because it's so common. But anyway, we get that sandwich between the parents and care for them, and then those grandkids, and as well as your own kids, and so that's why they call us the sandwich generation. But yet at the same time, life is good in so many ways, and again this afternoon I want to tell you that we are going to maybe move in a little bit from where we were. I like to start with that broad stroke, but this afternoon I'm going to talk a little bit about marriage makers and marriage breakers. And so we'll just go ahead and hop right into that. As Judy and I were sitting here, and some of you said a while ago, you know, with these couples that were up here, that was fun. I enjoyed that. We did. And somebody said, you know, we're in for marriage counseling. You're going to have to find somebody else. I'm only here for 2 days, but anyway. So as we think about marriage breakers and marriage makers this afternoon, let's begin this way. In Genesis 2:24, you'll remember that there's a background to that. When God created all things in the days of creation, we remember that He created man. And of all the things He created before that, He said, okay, this is good. And initially it was good when He made man, but then as He observed man for a while, He decided there's something that is not good, and what is not good is for man to be alone. So He created that woman from him, you remember, brought him to the man. He said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and they two shall become one. Well, we understand that. We kind of know that, and someone has maybe wisely observed that that's where really the problem begins, is to try to decide not only do they become one, but which one. And so there's a little bit of a struggle with that. Some of you are familiar with Burkeen and Faulkner. Many years ago, and of course, I know at least one of them has passed away, perhaps both at this time, I don't recall. But they used to do a seminar, and they were very good. They were kind of, I guess, detailed in what they did. There was in several sessions, and I remember going to a couple of those. But in those sessions, usually they would begin by saying that here's kind of the way it goes. That here's the man and the woman, young man, young woman, in most cases, when they get back from their honeymoon. It is Saturday morning, and they both wake up in bed back to back. And she is looking over toward the wall, and he is looking over toward the other wall, but they're not moving because they neither wants the other to know that they're awake yet. And he's sitting there thinking, you know, or lying there thinking, that I remember that my mother always got up on Saturday morning and fixed a big breakfast for the whole family. And so I wonder when she's going to get up and fix our big breakfast. And she's there staring at the other wall thinking, you know, my dad always got up on Saturday mornings and made pancakes for the family. And I wonder when he's going to get up and make those pancakes. And you said, so the story begins of he said, she said, and how we look at things. H. Norman Wright says, we all marry aliens. And I think there's some truth to that, but some comedy also. But we all come from different family backgrounds, and so as a result of that, naturally there's some things, there are a lot of adjustments that have to be made. What I try to tell couples is that if you're going to make it, you're going to have to learn to make some contracts along the way. And what I call them are the mini, M-I-N-I, the mini contracts that we have to make, because we're going to disagree on some things along the way. But if we learn that we can come to make this contract to where she's happy and he's happy, then it turns out to be a pretty good thing. But it's interesting when we think about that he said, she said, and some of the things that we get into of all the things that go on. Here's a little something that I think that you'll probably appreciate. A man is a person who, if a woman says, never mind, I'll do it myself, lets her. A woman is a person who, if she says to a man, never mind, I'll do it myself, and he lets her, gets mad. A man is a person who, if a woman says to him, never mind, I'll do it myself, and he lets her, and she gets mad, says, now what are you mad about? A woman is a person who, if she says to a man, never mind, I'll do it myself, and he lets her, and she gets mad, and he says, now what are you mad about, says, if you don't know, I'm not going to tell you. He said, she said. I would imagine we all get some interesting stories that we could tell, that we could probably entertain one another with for a little while. But I'm going to tell you a little story that I told many times before, and I have permission or I wouldn't tell this story. When Judy and I first got married, we lived in a little tiny apartment, which was really the back of a house, which was the annex to the church building in Gastonia, North Carolina. And we didn't know any different. We were in a little small apartment. We were in love, and it doesn't matter so much with us. But in that it was the back of the annex of the church building, they used that for classrooms on Sunday morning. So we'd have to open up the door so that they could use our bathroom, we thought. And so, it was just that way, but we didn't care. That was just part of it, and that's the way it went. Well, Judy grew up on a farm in North Carolina. She, along with her two sisters, didn't have any boys. And I thought, well, that's a good thing, growing up on a farm, because as I told you earlier, my mom was an old country cook, and so as I was growing up, we had 3 big meals a day. Now, I couldn't eat like that now. I couldn't get through those doors if I did, but that's the way we grew up. We had those 3 big meals a day. My mom, that's just the way she cooked. We had a big breakfast every morning, had a big lunch, and we had a big supper. Well, I thought, my marrying a girl that grew up on the farm, like my mother did, that, hey, that's a built-in thing, that she knows how to cook. But I was wrong. So for the first couple of weeks, we had sandwiches. And we had sandwich after sandwich after sandwich. Now, we vary a little bit, sometimes a bologna, sometimes banana. We have different ones, but always sandwiches. Well, after a couple of weeks, I kind of missing the vegetables. And I told Judy one time, and I said, honey, I like sandwiches. They're good and fine and all that. But, there are other things to cook. And I could see that look come across her face like, I don't know if I'd said the right thing or not. So she decided that she was going to make our first homemade meal, which was spaghetti. And I thought, not much can go wrong with spaghetti. But I was wrong again. I remember she made those noodles. To this day, I don't know how it happened. But I remember that when she poured the pot of noodles out, it stayed in the same form as the pot. And they were just stuck together. And I remember thinking about that. I thought, I've seen a lot of spaghetti, but I don't think I've ever seen any noodles just exactly like that. So she put those out and put the sauce that she had just gotten out of the can on the table. And so I thought, well, I'll go first. And so I sliced me off some of those noodles, and I put them on my plate. And then I poured some of that sauce, and, just ran everywhere. And I thought, this is all right. This is, I asked her to fix a meal, so she did. Well, I ate a bite of it, and I thought, this is going to make me sick. And so the way that in that little apartment we were in, the table was right up against the wall. And I'm at the end of the table, so the wall is right here, and Judy's sitting next to me. And I could tell she was kind of picking at hers too, and I don't know, and I'm telling you the absolute truth, don't know what possessed me to do it. But I stripped off one of those noodles and just threw it up on the wall. And when it hit, it never moved. It was just in that same position that I threw it up there. Well, then here come the crocodile tears then. And so she's not to be outdone, so she strips off one of those noodles, she throws it up there too. And hers stuck just like mine did. And I threw another one, she threw another one. And so after a while, we had a collage of noodles on the wall. And so we were laughing at that time. We get up and cleaned it off and went and got a sandwich. Now, I want you to hear this part. She's turned into a fine cook since, and she really has. I don't say that to just tongue-in-cheek. She really is. She's a very good cook now, but it was kind of an evolution, and it took a while. I was probably one of those that made one of those early mistakes in life of saying, I wish you could learn how to cook like my mother. Shouldn't have said that. But Judy's not one that will take things sitting down. And she said, yeah, and I wish you could make money like my daddy. And so took care of that little problem. We didn't have to deal with it anymore. Well, we do marry aliens, and Judy's a fine wife. I couldn't have asked for better. In fact, far beyond what my dreams ever have been. And she does an excellent job. I wish I were a better husband. But we work together, and we do things together, and I appreciate her and all that she does for me. But we all have our difficulties as we go along, and it's sad as we think about what the present state of marriage is across the board. Here's the latest statistics that we know, and this comes from reliable sources, that would say that 25% of the marriages are actually genuinely happy. And I would think that that would represent a lot of folks here. You wouldn't be here to begin with. So 25% of folks, if you were to ask them, are you happy in your marriage? They say, absolutely. I feel good. I love my husband, love my wife. We're just, we have a happy home. We really enjoy our time together. However, it is said that 50% of the marriages, even though they're still together, are static. And if they're really honest, the husband and probably the wife too would say, I'd like for it really to be better than it is. We don't talk about this, and I guess it's kind of the status quo, but I really wish it were better than it is. It probably could be worse, and so that's what it means. It just kind of flounders along, gets static. Then there are 25%, and this is hard to believe, but it's probably really true when you think about it across the board. 25% of the marriages that are out there that are still together are kind of on the brink. And probably, if it wouldn't take too much to push them over the edge, because they'd probably tell you, I'm just about ready to give up. The strange thing about this, and even in church life, and I'm in no way or am trying to make an accusation toward anyone here. Again, you're to be commended for being here. But the thing about it is we don't often know. Sometimes we do. But we don't often know what goes on behind closed doors. Even at Killen in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of, I'll just call them high profile kind of families, marriages to fall apart. Those that we never expected that they even had problems, but come to find out that had problems for a long time, they just weren't evident to everybody else. It is said at any given time that all marriages will go through various stages. The first two are very common to all. The first one we'll call intimacy. Intimacy is when you feel very happy in your relationship regardless of how long you've been there. You feel that your needs are being met, and I'm not talking about little isolated instances. I'm talking about on any given day that you would say, yes, I'm very happy with my spouse. We get along well, we're happy, and I feel like that this is exactly what I wanted in a marriage, and they both would probably agree with that. But every marriage is going to run into some conflict. What do you mean by that? I don't mean necessarily just an argument, but usually they lead to arguments. But there's going to be some conflict in every good marriage as well as all others. Don't ever think, young couples, that if there is something that happens that's a conflict in your marriage, that something is wrong. Well, yes, obviously there is something wrong. We wouldn't have conflict. But it doesn't mean that you're the only one that's ever gone through this. Something I believe would help every church, and we tried to do this some at Killen, maybe not as successfully as we'd like to, is when you have older couples that will bring younger couples to their houses. And sometimes it's a planned kind of thing. We call it marriage mentoring. And we bring them in. Sometimes we have some prepared questions ahead of time. And older couples are maybe sometimes able to head off some problems that might develop with younger couples just by letting them talk about these things. So every couple eventually is going to face some conflict in their marriage. I don't know if you're familiar with David's saying, but David did a series of family things several years ago. And he made a comment in that really stuck with me. He said, in every marriage within a 10-year period will probably face something that could either make or break that marriage, and especially if we're talking about the breaking part of it, because he said we're going to have to deal with something big enough in every 10-year period that probably could destroy that marriage if we don't really work at it. So every good marriage is going to face some conflict, but here's the real kicker. We've got to know how to deal with that conflict to get it back into intimacy again. In most marriages, you're going to find that there will be those dips in the conflict, but usually pretty quickly they'll make it back. But the problem is, if you don't know how to negotiate those mini contracts, if you don't know how to communicate during those times, then you come to an impasse. And if that goes on long enough, that marriage is not going to make it. And what's going to happen is they're going to get into the third stage that we call withdrawal. What happens in withdrawal is when actually we pretty well just build a wall and say, I'm tired of this. We fuss with this. We've never been able to make any progress with this. It's still there, and I'm just ready to give up on it. Something I have learned in counseling through the years, if a woman says, I'm done, usually she means, I'm done. If a man might say that, he might be a little easier to draw back into that relationship, but it's a little more complicated the other way around. But withdrawal can be both ways, and unfortunately, many times when couples go for counseling, they're already in the stage of withdrawal. Maybe one has said, nope, I don't want to go to that, don't want to do that, we'll just deal with their own problems, and he or she, as the other person might be, after a while just says, I'm not going to put up with it anymore. I'm tired. And it's almost like they're indifferent. They're saying, I don't care what you do. I'm done. I'm through. So that's what withdrawal is, and the most dangerous stage that any relationship, I'm not saying it cannot be repaired, but it's the most difficult one to repair of the three. Let me give you something that has a little bit of teeth. Judy and I actually have many years done what we call the Dynamic Marriage Seminar. And what I'm going to give you in the next few minutes here is actually what we do over an 8-week course. And so obviously there are a lot of things that we won't be able to get into, but it's based on Willard Harley's book called His Needs, Her Needs. Now there are 2 books that are similar, but I'll talk about those in just a minute. But anyway, the concept is, and I think here's what I like about it. It gives teeth to something that we kind of know anyway. But he says everybody has a love bank. What does that mean? It means that I have needs, or I want to get married to begin with, and you have needs, or you wouldn't want to get married to begin with. So what we do is we start filling that love bank, or actually we take out of it. Kind of works like a regular bank. You can make deposits and you can make withdrawals. If your withdrawals get ahead of your deposits, then you're in trouble. Well, we try not to make any withdrawals from the love bank in a marriage, but sometimes we do. So what I want to do in the next couple of minutes here is to talk about what is it that we can do to make deposits in the love bank, and then I want to look at the opposite of that. What do we do in a relationship that actually makes a withdrawal in that relationship that causes unpleasantness and sometimes can lead to very difficult situations in any relationship? So here we go. These are the things, these are the emotional needs, and emotional needs are different than wants. We all have wants, but we're not talking about wants here, we're talking about needs. These are the things that we do where we make deposits in the love bank of one another. I've already told you how long it's been since Judy and I got married, but Lamar Plunkett did our marriage ceremony, and we actually got married up in Henderson, Tennessee. We were just getting out of school, and Judy was just graduating. So we got married there at the Estes Church in Henderson, Tennessee. And in that time, you can remember some things you don't remember so well because you're nervous and all those other things. But there was one thing that he said that's always stuck with me, and I think he was exactly right. And he looked at me in the eye and he said, Stan, let me tell you something. If you will seek to make Judy happy in this relationship, there are 2 things that are going to happen. Because if you're making a deliberate effort to make her happy, you will make her happy. But number 2, you'll find out that you'll end up being happier yourself. And he looked at Judy and told her the same thing. But it's really the same concept. We have to continue to do those things that will make those deposits on a regular basis to make our marriage grow. Number 1, if you were to ask most men, this is not always true, and if this is not the way it stacks up for you, don't think that there's something wrong with you, because there isn't. This is just generally how it pans out. If you were to ask most men in a relationship, in a husband-wife relationship, what would be the thing that probably you put at the top of your page, not the only thing, but the top of your page, as something that's really important to you? I think that probably he would say sexual fulfillment. There's nothing wrong with that. God made us sexual individuals. Sometimes I have been in situations where the women would say, that's my number 1 need, and the man would not. But again, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that that's what we are. But if I don't know that, then I'm going to try to fulfill whatever my emotional needs are for you, and yours may be different from mine, and that's where we need to learn about each other. So most men would say, yes, I would say sexual fulfillment would probably be toward the top of my list, if not the top of my list. If you were to ask most women, this is not always number one, but most women would probably say, my most important emotional need is affection. I mentioned that I do a lot of premarital counseling, and one of the things that I will ask the young lady that's about to be married, I want to know what is affectionate to you. And I say, now I don't need to know, but the reason I'm asking you is I want him to hear what you say, because he may think that he's doing all the things right, and maybe there's some things that you're wishing he would do, but how's he going to know if you don't tell him? There are things that we learn all along the way. I hope to always be a learner. Judy likes to hold hands. I don't mean just 24 hours a day, but she likes to hold hands. I don't mind holding hands either. It's fine with me. But it means something different to her than it means to me, and that's true with most women. It used to be when I thought that Judy wanted to hold hands, I thought, well, she just wants to hold hands. That's good. But I didn't realize it is more of an action of security for her than it is just holding hands. I thought, wow, didn't know that. But you know, it's something that we have to learn. And so affection, whatever it is, and husbands, if that's something that we're trying to do, fulfill affection for our wives, then we need to know what is affectionate to her. Number 3, there is conversation. We might call it communication. But either way you put it, it is so true. Something else I had to learn is that, and I think that we men all know this, we are fixers. So I want Judy, if she's got a problem she wants to talk to him about, tell me, hurry, so I can fix it. But what I had to learn is she didn't want me to fix it. I thought, well, that's what I do. I fix things. She didn't want me to fix it. The way I fix it is to listen. To listen. Oh, really? But I can fix it. Most women work out their problems by talking through them. But that's something that men have to learn. I was taught that not only from Judy, but also my daughter, who at one time was 16, well past that now, but when she was 16 years old, I came home one night. I got home about 10 o'clock. I was just beat to the socks. I had been busy all day, had a speaking engagement that night, and it was about 10 o'clock, and I was ready to just get in bed. But my daughter was ready to talk. And I think if you haven't figured this out already with your kids, we need to, especially when they hit those teen years, if they get ready to talk, you better be willing to listen. I don't care what time it is, because that's when they will open up, and it's not always something that you can control. You better kind of listen to what they're saying. So she said, Daddy, I need to talk. I said, okay. So we had a front porch swing at that time. We sat down in that front porch swing. She talked for 2 hours. And all I did was every now and then grunt or say yes, because she was going wide open. After 2 hours, she stood up and kissed me on the cheeks, said, thank you, Daddy, and went in the house, and I'm sitting there thinking, what did I do? But what I did was I listened. And I didn't have to fix anything. She needed to talk through it. Everybody needs to learn how to communicate in any situation. Something I'm bad about doing is when, and I'll confess this, when Judy starts telling me something, I think I know where she's going, so I'll jump right in there. She said, don't do that to me. So she has to correct me every now and then. You didn't let me finish. Okay, but that's a fault of mine. I need to listen all the way through. We all need to listen all the way through. Here's how we teach couples to communicate. When there's a problem, when there's conflict, here's how the conversation needs to go. Now, if I were to say right now, Judy, no, let me put it the other way around because I can relate to it better. If Judy said to me, Stan, we need to talk about something, what's my first reaction going to be? I'm going to kind of, toughen up because I think, oh no, here it comes. Oh no, I dread this. I've done something wrong. It's not necessarily always that way, but I need to listen. So what we call this is we give each other the permission to say what's on their mind. We give them permission to say something. That doesn't mean, may I say this? No. What it means is I'm going to listen to you. So if Judy tells me, I might not agree that what her conclusion might be. I might not agree with that, but I don't need to say anything until she finishes. Because if she starts on something, I figured that's where you're going with this, what's she going to do? It's probably going to get mad and shut down and won't ever tell me. because she thinks it's not going to be worth it. But if I give her permission, I'm going to listen all the way through. And I might say, you know, you're right about that, and most of the time she will be, I think. But it could be that I would say, you know, I don't see it that way, but if this is causing you a problem, then I'm going to try to make you happy. So there's where we really learn how we're going to react to something. We're either going to say, you know, you either like it or lump it because that's just the way I am. That's never going to solve anything. And it may not be causing me a problem, but if it's causing her a problem or vice versa, then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to try to fix that because I don't want you to be unhappy in this relationship. That's how we really communicate with about anything. The next is recreational companionship. That doesn't, I tell couples, that doesn't mean mud wrestling. But it just means the things that we can enjoy doing together. Harlan, in his book, he said you shouldn't do anything that you don't enjoy doing together. I don't agree with that. I think a husband and wife may have individual interests, such as Judy has a Cricut and she enjoys crafting and things like that. I don't think I'll ever enjoy that. I enjoy what she does, but I don't think that's ever going to be me. I might like to go out and play tennis, but I don't think Judy is ever going to enjoy tennis. But we try to do most of the things that we do together, because if we're always just doing our own thing, then that's going to be a need that is unmet, because we need one another to do things together with, and that's important. The next thing, and a big one, honesty and openness. Honesty and openness. I think with every couple, if your spouse were to ask you a question, then you have a responsibility to answer it honestly. Now, with some couples, I'm going to tell you right up front. You might say, well, I want to know about. You can't unring a bell. So if you ask and they tell you, then they told you exactly what you're asking for, but you might not like always what you hear depending on what it is. So keep that in mind. But honesty and openness, I think that Judy is an open book. I don't ever have to wonder what's on her mind. She'll tell me anything. I'm not hardly that easy. But it doesn't mean I'm dishonest. It's just to say I'm not as forthcoming as she is with some things, meaning that, you know, I might not volunteer things, but if she asks me, I feel an obligation. In counseling, I've had situations to where maybe there was an affair going on. I'm not saying that's true with everyone, but I get into that, and more often than I'd like, for sure. What I will usually say to, let's just say it's the husband. I've gotten it both ways. But let's just say there's the husband, and his wife is wanting to work things out, and he says, I'm sorry, I want to work things out, and I made a mistake, and I'm sorry, and I said, okay, but you know, you've got to rebuild some trust here. And that means that if she wants to look at your cell phone at any time, she wants to look at your Facebook account at any time, it should be open to her. You shouldn't have any problem with it. Many times they'll say, I have no problem. I'm more than happy to do that. However, there's one that comes to mind immediately of a guy, when I told him that, he said, I'm not going to be treated like a child. But I knew he was saying more than that. I knew he was not being upfront and honest like he should be. And I told her later, I said, this is a problem. And sure enough, that marriage didn't stay together because the openness and honesty did not exist. Attractiveness of spouse, what does that mean? It doesn't mean you have to be a certain size or a certain age, or you have to look like this or look like that. It's just, obviously, you're already attractive to your spouse, or you wouldn't be married to begin with, because that's one of the first things that draws us together. So it just means that if this is what he likes, if this is what she likes, that you take that into consideration, that we try to be as attractive as we can. If someone says you work with what you've got, and that's the way that works out. Financial support. That doesn't mean that a husband has to make $1 million a year. If he does, more power to you. But it doesn't mean it has to be a certain point. It's just that she needs to feel that she is taken care of. I know that we have this big revolution. We talked about all the changes we have in our day and age. And we're trying to be neutered now by society. That will never happen. We're trying to be neutered in that way that there's no difference. But I guarantee you, of all the wives, all the prospective wives that I counsel with, if you were to ask them, do you expect your husband to provide for you? She'll say, yes, I do. Now, that doesn't mean that she's not willing to add to the income. If that be the case, she just says yes. But if you were to ask men, are you getting married so that your wives will support you? They're going to say no. And I believe that God intended for it to be that way because there's a need that a woman needs to have, or does have, that she needs to feel that she is financially supported. There again, it doesn't mean that she has to own the world, but it's just that she can be comfortable in their relationship. The next one is domestic support. I caused the biggest fight one day among another couple, and I didn't have any intention to do so at all. This kind of ties in more with the family commitment. But let me go ahead and deal with domestic support first. We, although still in our day and time when we said that this is a challenge of our day and time, husband and wife working outside the home, usually still, in most cases, not in every case, but in most cases, still most of the home work falls on the wife. But I don't know that that's always the best thing. I think it's probably not the best thing. When Judy was working, I felt an obligation to try to help out to some degree. I might not have done it as well as she did it, but I tried to help, and I took on the laundry. And when you got 3 kids and athletics and things like that, man alive, we had about 3 or 4 loads every day. But it was something I could help her with, and I think she really appreciated that. But working out and saying, you know, I realize that this is a situation where there's something I can do, and I want to try to make you happy. But let's get to this family commitment. This fuss that I caused one day is actually, I didn't know about it a good while later. We, for many years, lived 500 miles from either parent. And we made one of those visits back to my mother's house. At that time, my dad had already passed away. And my little brother, of course, I always took up a lot of time with him. He's 15 years my junior. And he was old enough, we were out in the yard and we're passing a football back and forth, which is just something I enjoy with my own kids and grandkids now and with my little brother at that time. Well, there was a guy, the little guy about the same age as my little brother that lived across the street, and he came over there and we're all throwing it around and we're kicking it around. We're just having a good time just out there in the yard. Well, what I didn't know is across the street that there was a woman that saw her son over there playing and got onto her husband of saying, you never do this kind of thing. That's what you need to be doing with your son rather than sitting here watching TV. And of course he fussed back, and it didn't take too long before that marriage fell apart. But she felt that he was not committed to the family. Something that a woman really needs is to see that the husband not only is concerned about her, but also engaged in the lives of the kids. That's an emotional need that they have. They need to see that. Husbands ought to feel that too. But often it doesn't happen, and that causes a real problem. And then there's that admiration. I often ask couples, and this is, which ones of these would you say would fit up close to the top? And many times, this will top the list for both sides. I need for my wife to be happy with me. I need for my husband to appreciate me. I need to have that admiration from them. I get beat up out here in the world. I need to know there's somebody that believes in me. So admiration is a big one. When we do those things for one another, we make huge deposits in the love bank. But here's one thing I would say. Let's suppose that a man would say, as we put it a while ago, that sexual fulfillment I would put at the top. There are other things that are just as important maybe or pretty close, but I would put that at the top, I think, if I had to put one. And maybe the wife said, I have no problem with that, but as far as how I would rate, I might rate it number 4 or number 5 on my list, just for example. So what do we do then? If the wife realizes that this is the number 1 need of her husband, she might say, I don't feel it to the degree that you do, or don't sense it as a need as much as you do, but I want to make you happy. And so as much as I can, I will raise my level of commitment to that to try to meet you on that level. But it's not just one way. The wife might say, affection is the most important to me. And the husband said, well, I like it, but it's number 4 on my list. If he's wise, he might say, I don't feel like a very affectionate person, but if it's that important to you, I'm going to try to be as affectionate as I can be, because I want you happy in this relationship. So that's how that works, okay? So these are the things that we do to make deposits. Here are the things that we do to make withdrawals, okay? There's another book by Harley that's actually called Love Busters. He mentions it in His Needs, Her Needs, but he's written another book which I feel is just as significant as the first one, which I think they're both classics. Number one, selfish demand. That doesn't mean that you can't ask something that you would like of your partner. But a selfish demand says, I expect you to do this for me and I don't care what you think about it. That is a selfish demand that makes a withdrawal from the other person because we have no regard for their feeling or how it might go with them. We just say, here's what I want. That's a selfish demand. Number two is a disrespectful judgment. I run into this especially in relationships, and more men than women, where they want to be a controller in that relationship. I'll just throw this out as just for an example. Suppose there's an election coming up, and the wife says, you know, I really like Mr. Green for that position in office. And the husband says, only stupid people would vote for Mr. Green. You ought to vote for Mr. White. Mr. White, everybody knows Mr. White's the only person for that position. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you disagreeing as to the person you think is the right one for the office. The problem is how you handle it. And so if you belittle the other person, it's like you just reach inside of them and make a withdrawal, and they're going to feel they'll feel some unhappiness and some discomfort in that relationship. Maybe the biggest one of all is not just anger, but angry outbursts. The Bible says be angry, but what? Sin not. I tell folks all the time, the first part of that's easy, getting angry. The sinning not is where the real challenge is. Anger is just an emotion. Everybody's going to get, even Jesus got angry, but he didn't sin. So the Bible wouldn't tell us something that we cannot do or command of us something that we cannot do. Be angry and sin not. An angry outburst is usually to punish you. To punish you. Here's what happened recently. I was talking to a couple, and the guy had a little problem with his anger. And I say little, I don't know how big it was, but it was a problem with her. And if he didn't get his way, he just kind of boom, kind of blew up. But she was not that way. That was not her family history, not her personality. But what she would do that was causing him discomfort is she would just shut down, say nothing, wouldn't answer a text, wouldn't answer a call, just kind of clammed up for a while. But what I told them, in essence, you're doing the same thing. You're both punishing one another in your own way. But when you get mad at your spouse and you take it out on them and you yell at them and you belittle them and you just, let it go, it's like you're just taking a big withdrawal out of that love bank because they're not going to forget that quickly and easily. It's hurtful when we have an outburst for someone else. Next is dishonesty. Now, we said honesty and openness, how important that is, but sometimes we do things that we don't realize. There's something that is called a protective liar that we don't really mean. It kind of sounds bad to us, but I don't mean it that way. What is a protective liar? It usually falls on one or the other. It happens in our relationship, even though Judy has a business degree, that I do the budget at our house. I pay the bills. That's not to say she couldn't do it. It's just that usually one or the other decides to do it, and so I happen to be the one that pays the bills. Let's suppose that Judy says, we got this event coming up in a couple of days, and, I'd really like to have a new dress. Can we afford for me to go out and get a new dress? And I'm looking at the budget, and I'm thinking, we had some extra bills here, and we don't really have the money, but I want her to have that new dress. And so I tell her, I said, yeah, we've got it. Go on out there and get you one. So she goes out and she buys that new dress. Well, suppose then about a month later we get a bill in the mail that we're overdue. We're behind on a bill. And maybe she picks it up in the mailbox and she comes to me and says, San, what happened here? Did you forget to pay this? And I said, no, that's not really what happened. You remember when you asked me the other day that if we had the money and you wanted that new dress? And she said, yeah. I said, well, we really didn't have it. But I wanted you to have it, so I'm trying to be nice to you. I wanted you to get that dress. Well, Would that make her happy? No, I think it'd make her very unhappy because we've talked about this. She said, I'd much rather you just been honest with me up front because I feel much worse now than us being unable for me to buy the dress to begin with. But that's what we call a protective liar. That we're trying to spare their feelings, so to speak. And I don't mean that we're brutal to one another, but we still need to be very honest in our relationships and our communication. Next, annoying habits. I'm sure that we all think that we don't have any. When Judy and I went through the course some years ago, I was interested in seeing what she might put down because there might have been several possibilities there about what annoying habit she would have put down for me. You know what it was? How I floss my teeth. How I floss my teeth. And I'm thinking, how many people floss their teeth to begin with? But it wasn't the fact that I flossed my teeth. It was the fact that I was being way too, I guess, uncareful with it. I'd be around her and, she'd hear that popping and carrying on, which drove her crazy. So I'm now a closet flosser, okay? I still floss my teeth. I just don't do it with her around because I didn't want to make her unhappy with that. I remember several years ago, we had a game very similar to what you guys played up here, which was a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys for what you did. But I remember there was an elder and his wife, and they were on up in years. And it was kind of newlywed, but this is oldywed. So they asked the question, what is something that he does that just drives you crazy? You know what her answer was? He picks his nose. He about fell out of his chair. But you get the sense of that. Now, we could probably pick at each other all the time if we wanted to pull up everything. There's some things we learn to live with just because we're human beings. But we need to choose our battles. If there's something that the other person does that you just cannot live with, then that's what you need to deal with. But it doesn't mean we need to just be snapping at every little thing that we might not like. But this is something that we can't get beyond. Then the last thing, as far as a withdrawal, would be independent behavior. And that means that I do what I want to do, but I have no regard for what Judy might think about it. Okay? I don't mean sinful things. I just mean things. If I want to go out and play tennis, I just go ahead and say, yeah, I'll be there Thursday night. Maybe there's something else you'd rather do. The idea is we try to get on the same page. She does the same with me. I don't have to ask her permission to go and play tennis. She doesn't ask my permission to go out with a friend of hers for lunch. It's not that. It's just that we're on the same page. And we try to keep our schedules such that we understand, we know what's going on with each other. And it's not that we're just independents out here just doing whatever we want to do, because that too brings about some discomfort and unhappiness in a relationship. So these are things that we do that make withdrawals that we need to try to do away with as much as we can. On the other hand, when we're talking about those deposits of meeting emotional needs, those we need to do as much as we can. Okay? Any comment that you'd like to make or any question before I get to the final thing here? All right, again, I've done such a good job. You don't have a question at all. All right, now, I know that this might seem a little odd to you. I'm going to make you do it, and I'm going to give you a pop quiz tomorrow. But you've got some homework. Won't take you long. Won't take you long. But your assignment is, and I put these on here so you won't forget them, the needs. Okay? And I think it's easy. Follow just 2 or 3 little exercises. You can do these. You could probably spend hours if you want to talking about them, but it won't take you very long to go through them. But I'd like for each couple here to, well, husband and wife, to both get a copy of this because there's something both of you can do. Give your answers, and then here is the final thing. It's not on here. But when you find that maybe there's something that you can improve in your relationship, the question is, what are you going to do to make it happen? What are you going to do to improve your relationship? I'll close with this. It's been said that the biggest enemy to a great marriage is a good marriage. What does that mean? It means that maybe we just kind of become complacent or satisfied with where we are, but it could be much better than what it is if we're willing to do the work. So don't let a good marriage become the enemy of a great marriage. So this is what this is about. It's just what we talked about here in the last little while. And I would encourage you to give a little time, sometime the rest of the day, just sit down, take a few minutes together, and talk about these things. Because there was a time that I wouldn't have had any, if you'd asked me, what does Judy have? Anyway, what does she like? What are her top emotional needs? I couldn't have told you. But when I know, then that helps me a lot as a husband to know what I can do to make her happier in our marriage and vice versa. That's the reason for this. So that's your assignment. Be sure and pick these up before you leave. I'm not going to make you do them, but I really think it will help you if you will. This will be a follow-up to our session today. Thank you so much.